And I'm delighted to say that we have Juleen here with us. Juleen, hello.
Hello, Vivienne. How are you?
I'm great. And first of all, congratulations. The Claude Bernard Medal and Lecture is a very singular honour, and you join a roll call of really outstanding people over the past 53 years. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm really, really honored, and I'm grateful for this distinction. So it's a big moment in my career. Thank you.
So I wanted to take you through some of the points that you're making in your lecture. You were one of the first, as you say in our little film that we made with you, to recognize the importance of exercise almost as a drug. Tell us a bit more about how that view first came to you.
Well, it started from my own personal interest in exercise as an athlete, and I just wanted to understand how the body adapted. And then, on a personal story, my grandfather had heart surgery, and the treatment course for him initially was physical exercise and exercise, modifications after he had his surgery. And I thought that was just so fascinating. And then I understood that exercise was really beneficial to improve insulin sensitivity, which is what many people with diabetes or obesity have as a part of their disease pathogenesis. And so I wanted to understand how exercise could improve insulin sensitivity and could maybe delay the progression of type 2 diabetes. And so that's kind of where it started for me.
So really at the time that you began this, people were thinking of exercise simply in terms of its cardiovascular benefits. And here are you thinking that it's got something to do with, insulin sensitivity as well. How was that viewed by your peers at the time?
Well, I think people thought it was difficult. They thought it was soft science, and what we could do is to try to dissect the molecular underpinnings of how exercise could remodel muscle tissues and be more insulin sensitive. And remarkably, we found that exercise could increase glucose uptake by an insulin-independent mechanism. I mean, we're not the only people that studied that area. Several teams have been working on that field, but we could identify some of the signaling molecules that instructed proteins to regulate sugar uptake in muscle cells. So that was exciting.
And what does that lead you to? What does that mean, do you think, for the average diabetologist?
Well, I think it's important because when you're treating people with diabetes, you can also add to the arsenal of tools exercise. Of course, there's many very, very good pharmacological therapies that are being used today. But in addition, the people that you treat can also add that to the arsenal, the tools. So, walks, running, high intensity training, many different forms of exercise can be beneficial in the control of blood sugar. Not exclusively for some people with diabetes, but for many people, it can be one of the tools that you can use to maintain insulin sensitivity, improve it, and improve your blood glucose control. So I think that's interesting. That being said, a lot of people don't even appreciate that exercise is a powerful tool. So I hope my message helps to convey that.
Now, when you say exercise to lots of people, I think they think of really quite different things. So they think of it, as doing kind of endurance sports. And many people who perhaps struggle with their weight or haven't had a history of doing sport think that's not for me. But actually, what does your research tell us about the level or intensity of exercise that's required to have this, upregulation in gene expression?
Okay, so that's a great question because everybody thinks, I don't want to go to the gym. That's not for me. Well, the good news is that even in your home, you can modify your behavior, you can increase your physical activity, and that can have an improvement in your glucose homeostasis. So it can be simple things like making certain that you're not sitting all day long, getting up every half an hour, making sure you get steps in. There's evidence that suggests that about 8,500 steps a day is really beneficial to improve cardiometabolic health. Another way of doing exercise, if you're pressed for time, is something called high intensity interval training. And that would be just performing short bursts of high intensity exercise. So maybe you only do 6 times 1 minute of high intense exercise, either on a bicycle ergometer or walking, for example. So there's lots of different ways to get physical activity and exercise into your life. And it doesn't necessarily mean you're training for the next world-class marathon. Every single step, every single day can make an improvement.
And do you think that what you're doing is really having a much wider impact in terms of how people think about diabetes as not just about the kind of person's glucose control, but really about their whole, a much more holistic approach and thinking beyond simply treating the numbers?
Well, I think the work that we're doing, we're studying something that many people can understand. It's physical activity and exercise. And it empowers you. You feel a sense of power to be able to take some of these matters into your own hands. I mean, you can modify your lifestyle. It doesn't necessarily mean you won't become diabetic, but it does mean that you may prevent that from occurring. Or if you have diabetes, you could lower the amount of insulin that you need because you're doing other things in your lifestyle that can enhance insulin sensitivity. So I think what it does is it allows you to feel that you have more at your own disposal to be able to help in the management of the diabetes condition.
Can we just go to the research? Because one of the things that's so interesting always about research is that you open one door and then 10 other doors open in front of you because you've... So what is there that is still intriguing to you? What are you working on now?
Well, all right. So I think the whole field of science, to be able to have the privilege of spending your life doing science is just fascinating. And it's always an evolution. And so we started out really trying to understand at the molecular level how exercise modifies glucose uptake. And now the team is thinking a little bit more about the environment in general and our circadian rhythms and our diurnal rhythms. So every day we have rhythms in terms of our hormone release, in terms of our metabolism. And my team now is thinking a little bit more about how do we synchronize what we do, our diet and our exercise, with our intrinsic molecular clock, and this clock that kind of governs some of our metabolism. And so can we align, let's say, our sleeping patterns, our food intake through the day, and the exercise we do with this internal clock to fine-tune how that clock works to improve metabolism, sugar uptake, fat burning, glucose and energy homeostasis. And so that's what I'm interested in today.
Because there's that thing called, I think it's called the dawn phenomenon, when you get this kind of sudden swing that's going on, and then that puts everything out of kilter. Is that the kind of thing that you're thinking of?
Yeah, I mean, surprisingly, I think one thing that we found with a very small study was that if people with diabetes did high intensity exercise in the morning, they actually had a worsening of their blood sugar. We expected an improvement. When these same people did their exercise in the afternoon, they found an improvement in their blood sugar. And so you're right about the morning period. Now, whether it was the high intensity exercise or the fact that the people were fasted led to this hyperglycemia is unknown yet. So there is something about the time of day. And it may be that you have an accelerated catecholamine release in the morning. You're coming off of an overnight fast. You may need to have some fuels on board to prime metabolism. So we're really trying to understand that morning versus afternoon or evening effect on exercise and diets. So like I would say, stay tuned, because that's something we're really interested in.
And the other fascinating thing about body clocks is that they kind of shift during our lifetime. So you think of teenagers who are essentially jet lagged because their clock has moved. But there are also the differences between people, the owls and the larks. And so taking all of those things together, it's a huge puzzle to unpick.
Yeah, I mean, I think to some extent, I think it's been a bit underappreciated. I think we've kind of taken that for granted. We don't put sleep into the picture. That's becoming much, much more interesting to us to understand how the sleep patterns affect this. And, to understand everybody kind of knows I'm not a morning person. I mean, or I really am an evening person, et cetera. So you kind of know that, but in some ways we'd like to know why. And what are the molecular underpinnings to make some people, morning birds, and some people who are kind of night owls? And then how does that affect also our response to exercise or diet, or the propensity to develop metabolic diseases?
It's fascinating to know whether night owls are more prone to develop diabetes, or whether it's the other way around. As you say, Juleen, you answer one question and there's a million more doors open in front of you, and that's the joy
Absolutely.
of science. That is the joy of it.
Absolutely. Always something new to learn, and I don't think you ever stop learning, which is so delightful.
You've got many, many hats. You do all sorts of things. I know that you've developed a wonderful team around you, both in Copenhagen and in Stockholm. And I just wanted to end our conversation. This is the pinnacle, the Claude Bernard Lecture. It's a lifetime achievement. What advice would you have to your junior team members coming up, reflecting on your own career in research?
So I think my biggest advice to anybody in the field of science is follow your passion and keep your curiosity. Choose your questions, wisely, and dare to go along a path that people haven't necessarily traveled, because so much of what we're here to do is to discover kind of new ground. And there are going to be ups and downs along the way. There are a lot of ups and downs in science. But I think if you're really trying to answer questions that you're just burning for, you get through the downs and you can really enjoy the ups. So that is kind of my biggest advice to start with.
It's been such a pleasure and an honor talking to you. I'm thrilled that you've been honoured with this great award. And actually, I think your research is so meaningful, not just for clinicians, but it's also so meaningful for people living with diabetes. They can have a whole new view of their life. And that's largely thanks to you, Juleen. So please accept through me their gratitude as well for the work that you and your team have done at both the Karolinska and at the University of Copenhagen.
Well, I really appreciate that you say that and you recognize this, Vivienne, because it is fundamentally important for me to be asking questions that really do ultimately have an effect on people living with diabetes. It's been really important for me to take questions that are really going to be translatable. And I'm, again, very honored to be recognized by the EASD for my work, the work of my teams throughout the years. So it's not just me, it's really all of the people that I've been collaborating with, mentoring, supervising over the years. And on behalf of all of my team, I really do, again, thank the EASD.
Thank you so much.